Hi, in this tutorial we're going to talk about creating a Django web application using Visual Studio Code. Chances are you're a web developer and you want to build a web application using Python, and you would like to use as little code as possible and get up and running with something that's ridiculously fast. And you've probably heard about the Django project, which you can check out here at the djangoproject.com to even become more familiar with it if you would like to. So what we're going to do to start out here is we want to make sure you have Python installed. Getting the latest is always recommended. So as of now, the latest is Python 3.10.0, which you want to download and install as a prerequisite. And you can do that and verify by opening up a command prompt. Check your version. In my case, if I do Python -- version, you'll see that I have 3.7.6, which is in my class path, so that's what gets picked up. However, I do have the latest version installed currently as well, but I haven't updated my path, so it misreports currently. So once you're set up with Python, the next thing is to ensure you have VS Code. And hopefully you do already, but if you don't, download it and install it. It's a very popular web development integrated development environment, or IDE, and that's why I'm putting this tutorial together, because you may want to do your Django development with Visual Studio Code. My next recommendation is to set up a folder on your computer where you like to do your development in. I like to use my C users folder, and inside of that I have a source folder, and that's the directory that I'm going to actually set up and build this sample Django application in. So what I'm going to do is do some work in my command prompt to get us all set up and ready to go, and basically initialize and establish a Python environment to be used with Django. So what I want to do is to first get my location of my command prompt into that source folder that I just showed you. I'm going to change that directory. I'm going to make a new folder for this demo, or for whatever project I'm working on, and I'm going to call this the Django demo. Okay, and then I'm going to change the directory to the Django demo, and while I do that, it makes the folder in my File Explorer behind the scenes. Okay, it'll be empty, but if we look closely, it's right there above my command prompt. Now we're ready to run some Python commands to make our virtual environment. And what we'll do is use py-3 and -m. And what we're doing is we're making a virtual environment, so it's venv is the command for virtual environment. And then we want it to go into a folder named .venv for virtual environment. So we're going to run that command. I'm going to give it a second or two. And upon this successfully completing, inside that Django demo folder, if we were to open up, we would see a handful of other folders that get created to establish our virtual environment. So this just completed. Take a quick look, and you'll see there's the virtual environment folder, and it's got include folder, library folder, and a scripts folder. And what we really care about is inside that scripts folder, there's an activate file. And that activate file is going to allow us to activate our virtual environment. And I always like to test it out here just to make sure it always is working. So I'm going to say look in that virtual environment folder, look in the scripts folder, and look for the activate, and we're going to run it. If all works properly, you'll get a set of parentheses and the virtual environment to the left of your command prompt, and you can see that over there on my screen. If you look right there, you see it. That shows that my virtual environment is active. Now we're ready to launch VS Code and start setting up and installing the Django inside of our workspace. So this folder, the Django demo, is going to be known as my workspace in VS Code. I could launch VS Code through my programs, or I could do a shortcut where I just type the word code and a period, So code space a period. And what this is a shortcut to tell VS Code to open up a workspace in that location. So when VS Code opens here on my computer, we're going to see that I'm in the Django demo workspace already. Much faster than loading VS Code and then having to go ahead and do an open of a workspace. Okay, so there I am. Here's my workspace, and there it is, the Django demo, and then there's my virtual environment folder. And if we expanded it, you can see all of the other folders that I showed you through my File Explorer. The next thing we want to do is we need to tell it what to use for our Python interpreter. Okay, so what we want to do is go to View Command Palette, and we want to type Python select interpreter. Now mine's already going to be here, so if you start typing out Python, IntelliSense is going to narrow your list, and you're looking for select interpreter. It's going to show you all the interpreters you have on your computer. Now you want to choose the one that is for your current virtual environment, and it's going to take a few seconds here. Let it finish loading. You're going to see it's going to be eventually show up, and mine's still thinking a little bit because I have done this many times, and it's going to actually make that one the recommended. So now that it's stopped thinking, it's saying, look, the one in this virtual environment scripts that Python exe, that's the one we recommend, and you'll see that that's my current version of Python as well, the 3.10 version that I told you I had set up on my computer. So I'm going to choose that as my interpreter. And then once I've chosen my interpreter, we're going to start that virtual environment. And it's pretty cool. Visual Studio will automatically start that virtual environment by just going to Terminal, New Terminal now. And if you watch, give it a second, it's going to drop a command in there for PowerShell. And it activates. Okay, it activated that virtual environment. And just like I showed you my command prompt, there it is. It's all ready to go. It's ready for us to execute and to run some Python commands to set up the Django. But before we're going to do that, we want to make sure that we have the latest version of pip on our computer. Okay, so pip here, we'll do Python, and we're going to do Python-m, we're going to do pip, we're going to do install, and we're going to do upgrade, and we're going to do pip. All right, so what this is going to do for us, it's going to say, let's get the latest version of pip on our machine. So you're going to see it's going to uninstall what I currently have and reinstall the latest. And this will take a few seconds. So you see mine's already has it satisfied, but even so, it's going to uninstall it and successfully uninstall it, and then you're going to see it successfully installs it. So once we have pip, now we're able to use pip to install the Django. So we're going to type in Python-m pip install the Django. And just double check, make sure I typed everything correctly. And this will take another few seconds or two to install all of the Django components and libraries necessary. And once that completes, which it has, our next process is going to basically create and run a minimal Django app. And to do that, now we're going to use Django admin, start project, and we're going to use web project. Okay, so that's the command we're going to run. But before we do that, we're just going to expand this to Django demo folder and just double check everything's looking okay still. And while that runs here, in this command, after the web project, the one thing I forgot was to put a period. That's going to make sure it does it in this the folder that we're currently in. Okay, so the Django-admin start project space web_project. That's going to be my project name. And you saw that it created the web project directory, the manage py file, along with some other Django files that are necessary. You have your init, your ASGI, your settings, your URLs, and your WSGI files. Okay, so we have that set. And the next thing we need to do before we're ready to verify that the Django's up and running and that we have an application ready to start working with, we're going to end up running the migrate command that's going to be executed off the manage py file. So we're going to say python manage.py, and we're going to say migrate. And we want to make sure, just confirm that the path we're in the Django demo path, and that manage py file is right there. Okay, so it's going to execute the migrate command here, which in this case is going to create a SQLite database for us. So you'll see now we have db.sqlite3 created. That's going to be necessary for us to build out our application in subsequent tutorials. But let's make sure everything's running and properly working. So let's start the web server now. So if we do python space manage.py again, and if we do run server, what this is going to do is going to start our web development server. And it'll start it by default with port 8000 on localhost. And what we can do is we could specify another port if we wanted to. Like sometimes I like to run on 8080. So we could run on port 8080 in case you were using 8000 for something else. Again, this is your development environment. You may have certain ports in use for certain things, so you should always know how to start a server on a different port. And here in VS Code with Python and run server, you just specify the port after the run server command. So space and then the port you want to run on. We're going to give this shot a shot on port 8080 and see what happens. If all runs and starts, you're going to get a URL here in your VS Code terminal that you can click on to show you that you have the Django and Python up and running. And you'll see that it's got the port 8080 at the end, and it's showing the URL IP address of 127.0.0.1, which most of you know is the same as localhost. It's your loopback. So if we hit Control click on that URL, this is going to cause our default browser to go ahead and launch the Django application page showing you have it up and running. So in this case, my Microsoft Edge is launching here. You'll see in the title, the install worked successfully. And this shows that I'm ready to develop in the Django with my local development environment and in VS Code. So you see that the Django 3.2, it's up and running, and I can go through and go forward building other applications and such as necessary locally on my computer. I hope you found this tutorial useful and valuable. If you have any questions, if you need any assistance, feel free to use the comments, or additionally you can go to professorwolfe.com and you can fill out my contact form and find my personal information there. Thank you very much and have a great afternoon.